We're well aware that Jesus taught in parables, using parables. And a parable is not just a nice little story. It's actually constructed in a way that, number one, challenges the reader or the listener, and number two, is memorable. It's meant to be something that you could remember after you heard it taught. And I think that we can all remember parables for a number of different reasons. One of the reasons we remember them is Jesus uses this device. He always has, or majority of the parables have three characters in them. Three characters. Think about the story of the prodigal son. We have the father, we have son one, and we have son two. We think of the parable of the Good Shepherd. We have the shepherd, we have the lost sheep, and we have the 99 unlost sheep, right? The parable of the Good Samaritan. We have the Samaritan. We have the poor guy that got beat up by the road. And then we have this kind of group that would be called the unneighbors. That would be the robbers, obviously, and then the priest and the Levite who passed the victim on the road. So we have these three characters in them. Today's gospel, the parable also has three. Not as obvious. We have the master. We have the two servants who made money on the investment, and then we have the one lazy servant who dug the hole. So what Jesus does in this is, for these three characters, one of them represents God, or the good. One represents the listener, and one represents the others, other people. Okay? Now that sounds very simple, but probably if I was to tell you the story of the good shepherd, or the Good Samaritan, the prodigal son, at different times in our lives, we might feel like different characters, right? So if I was to tell the story of the prodigal son, how many of you would be son one, the one that took all the money and squandered it? Okay, no dissolute livers here. Oh, I see one in the back. Okay. Son two, the one that was, always around, did what they were supposed to do, but resented it like crazy. Okay? Yeah, so there are a number of us that are there. All right? So we recognize ourselves in these stories. Now, the point is, Jesus knew that his hearers would recognize themselves in the stories. But the point is not to just say, oh yeah, I'm son one or I'm son two. Because does Jesus want us to be son one or son two? They're both jerks. Jesus wants us to be like the Father, the one who forgives. The story of the Good Samaritan. Are we the bully that hurts others? Are they the ones that look the other way? Are we the Good Samaritan? We might see ourselves, maybe all three of them at the same time. Who does Jesus want us to be like? The one that represents God, the Good Samaritan. How about the Good Shepherd? Are we the one lost? Are we the 99 who stay around? Doesn't matter. Jesus wants us to be the shepherd. The shepherd. And in today's gospel, are we the ones who take the talents and use them for good? Do we just kind of hide what it is? Or are we the master who is the generous giver and who celebrates the good of his servants. That's a little bit more difficult to say. Maybe we could be the ones who make the extra money and the master at the same time. The point is, there's a challenge. The challenge to be people of mission, to the challenge to discipleship that calls us into mission, into working the promise and demands and challenges of the gospel. Now, this week's gospel, it is the prelude to next week's gospel. Next week's gospel, I'll give you just a preview to it. This doesn't mean that you don't have to come to Mass next Sunday. Next week's Sunday is the story of the sheep and the goats. So he's saying, use your talents so that you don't become like the goats. Jesus teaches, challenges, commands that we love one another, that we use the gifts that we've been given to share with those in need. I think we live in a world where there's a lot of need. To deny it is like putting our heads in the sand, putting our gifts in a hole in the ground. The challenge of the gospel is always to move from worship into service, so that we might truly, when we come to worship, share in the joy of the Master.